Hi everyone, welcome to another book review. This one's about the Sanatorium Under the Sign of the Hourglass.
I am simply calling it the book, without any epithets or qualifications, and in this sobriety there is a shade of hopelessness, a silent capitulation before the vastness of the transcendental, for no word, no illusion can adequately suggest the shiver of fear, the presentiment of a thing without name, that exceeds all our capacity for wonder. How could an accumulation of adjectives, or a richness of epithets help, when one is faced with that splendiferous thing? Besides, any true reader, and this story is only addressed to him, will understand me anyway, when I look him straight in the eye and try to communicate my meaning. A short, sharp look, or a light clasp of his hand, will stir him into awareness, and he will blink in rapture at the brilliance of the book. For, under the imaginary table that separates me from my readers, don't we secretly clasp each other's hands?
So the book was written by Polish-Jewish author Bruno Schulz and was published in 1937. A bit about Schulz himself: he was a painter, author and I think teacher as well, living in Poland. And during World War II he was relocated into a ghetto in like the late 30s, early 40s, under Nazi regime. As an artist in his own right, one of the Nazi officers asked him to do like a mural or like some kind of artwork for him in the officer's home, which Schulz did, but unfortunately he didn't live much longer than this because another Nazi officer who had felt wronged because the officer that asked for the mural to be painted had killed his personal Jew, and as revenge this other officer murdered Schulz while he was walking home with a loaf of bread, and that was the end of his life and his career, unfortunately. Thus, Schulz's works were lost during the Holocaust, including his last work, The Messiah. Luckily we have books like Street of Crocodiles and this book to remember him by and to see his magic through, but ultimately a very sad and wasteful demise and end of his life. To give a bit of a summary of this book itself, The Sanatorium Under the Sign of the Hourglass. I constantly have to look back at the title because it's longer than I remember. It's kind of like, it's hard to tell whether it's one cohesive novel or if it's just different short stories within one book, because there's links between the stories and it's almost set in one like neighbourhood, but then at the same time there are things that they are just separate stories and they do sometimes feel disjointed. So yeah, it's kind of hard to tell which of the two it falls into. That being said, there are overarching themes, and it almost sometimes reads like a kind of magical, surreal autobiography of Schulz himself. It covers topics like the death of the narrator's father, the provincial town where he grew up, and his birthplace, his hometown as well, things like that. So it all kind of links to a narrator's past. So I first heard of the story through the film, the 1973 film, The Hourglass Sanatorium, by fellow Polishman director Wojciech Haas's film, I think his name is pronounced. And yeah, I really love that film. I'm really into like my art house kind of stuff, so that one I just thought was spectacular. It's just crazy and super out there and avant-garde. I had so many crazy ideas, and yeah, I love the film, and then I thought, wow, they've made a book out of this, no way. So I read the book because of that, and it's actually magic how much Haas has interpreted Schulz's work so faithfully, which is kind of crazy to think because the book is just so like crazy itself, and it jumps from point to point, and it's written in such a way that is very dense and surreal, and you wonder how Haas managed to, I don't know, keep the tone so sincere and consistent. And I think the thing is, because the book is so like, the book's almost avant-garde and ridiculous, that the film, being as ridiculous as it is, matches perfectly. And I don't think any other director might have caught so much of Schulz's magic as Haas does. So yeah, I really have to applaud him for that. Oftentimes you see a director take a more standard and straightforward story, like Kubrick or something, taking, I don't know, The Shining, and making a more art house film out of it. The Hourglass Sanatorium, it was almost like taking an art house book and making an art house film out of it, which is, I don't know, less common to see, I guess, or a bit more rare. And yeah, it was just incredible. So yeah, I think you can understand by now that I really enjoy this book. From what I've said already, yeah, I think it's a magic book, and I think that there's no one that really comes close to Schulz's, I don't know, just his like intricacy of language mixed with his absolutely crackers way of looking at things. Like, it's almost like a child's written this book in the nicest way possible, like a child with an amazing vocabulary has written this book, because he sees things in such a unique way that I don't know, you would never think to consider something. And like, you know, the term unique's thrown around a lot, I think, but with this book it genuinely feels like something absolutely new, and it makes it difficult to read sometimes because it's like, it is like seeing things in a completely different way. It's like the whole way you see the world almost is like spun in its head, and it can be tricky, I think, for a modern reader and a modern adult reader to see things in the way Schulz writes, but it's so gripping and interesting that you kind of just feel carried away with it and super, I don't know, accepting of it and wanting to read more. Preparing for this video as well, I always write like a bit of an idea of what I want to say, but I'm just going to read this out because otherwise I'll forget exactly how I want to say it. I put Schulz writes in such a uniquely kaleidoscopic way that both confuses and spellbinds. A lot of times people will say an author's unparalleled, but how Schulz commands language is, in my honest opinion, genuinely new and bold. And yeah, I just wonder if there's anyone who's written like him since. I haven't read loads of books, but from all the ones I've read, this is like, I don't know, it's just like insanely different and weird in the best way possible. Every time I read it, I just felt so inspired, and like, yeah, as I say, it's like talking to a child who sees things in a completely new way. It's almost the same thing of like, you leave with ideas and concepts and ways of looking at things that you never have before. And I think his use of like idiom and simile and things like that as well, like, they just completely push past like how people see the world, and it pushes it right to the limits of language almost. Yeah, and it's so magical to see and read. And I've read books that are like, I don't know, philosophical or have like a philosophical tone. I feel like this almost is more philosophical than the other ones I've read, because it, like, even when people discuss philosophy, it's very much in the realm of the real and the world we actually live in, whereas this, it just feels like a complete other world. It feels like you're reading a dream of someone. And not to take away from the beauty of his language, but because Schulz writes in such a like innovative way, it does at times feel like claustrophobic and overwhelming as a reader. And I actually had to stop this book halfway because I was just getting to a point where I was like, this is, I don't know, it's stimulating me too much, and like, yeah, it just felt a bit, yeah, as I say, overwhelming to read sometimes. But I don't think that's a problem with the writing as much as it is a problem with me, I don't know, not having the pace to keep up with it. It's so well written, it feels overwhelming, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because there's no great book that doesn't feel daunting to some extent, right? So it's like that, I suppose. If I was to compare his writing style to anyone, it probably would be Nabokov. For they both write in a very like, I don't know, I suppose like a verbose dense way. Like Nabokov, Schulz pushes language to like its extremities, and they both possess this very verbose and detailed way of writing. But Schulz is far more like dreamlike and almost surreal in his writing. And then you can compare him again to like a writer like Kafka, for they both have this like surreal and fantastical kind of interesting way of seeing concepts and ideas of the world. But with Kafka, I think he writes in more of like a bureaucratic kind of way, whereas again Schulz is a lot more, I don't know, almost more positive, I think, and dreamlike, kind of writing style. I think with Schulz it's almost like he's embracing the craziness of his writing, and he's like so unafraid to be his like absurd self, and he doesn't balance it out as much as Kafka does, as I say, with like a more like clinical kind of style. He goes completely into the absurd. I can't really talk much about the characters because it's like different short stories. The narrator's a bit inconsistent. There's certain stories where the narrator has more of a voice, and then there's other ones where he's kind of like a backseat to the story, or there's not really a narrator at all, kind of thing. But it's interesting that, I don't know, because the book kind of reads like a dream or a series of dreams or something, the character and the things that happen to the character and the things he sees and the world he's in, it almost, I don't know, I feel that you could spend like a long time analysing them through a dream analysis lens, and you can see it as like, I don't know, a manifestation of his psyche or things he's thinking or allegories for his life, kind of thing. So yeah, it's almost like it's like turning real life into something magical or into something like a dream. In terms of the plot, the book is somewhat indescribable because it's purposefully enigmatic, I think, and as I say, it often like sits itself between reality and dream, or like truth and myth. So you're kind of wondering through the pages and the words and the paragraphs, thinking like, how much of this is actually true, how much of this is dream. And yeah, for sure it takes a lot from like magical realism, or rather it sets more of a precedent for the magical realism to come in prose, as Kafka has for surreal imagery in books. But yeah, it's just such an interesting way to write a book, and such an interesting thing to explore, like, I think, because, I don't know, this is more of like a aside, I guess, but we still don't really know why dreams are a thing or why we dream, and I feel like this book really capitalises on that, and I don't know, looks into the person through the dream and sits the dream and the real side by side, so that you can kind of analyse it in a more, I don't know, in a way that hadn't really been done before at that point in time. So yeah, it's a really interesting way of looking at the world, I think. I don't really have the time and energy or the brain power to go through this book and analyse it like a dream interpreter would. But for sure you could spend like years and years looking at this book and analysing it. And it's the same way, it's kind of like a puzzle or a riddle, I suppose, as a dream is, to some extent. In terms of themes and imagery, obviously the Nazi occupation of Poland was a big one for him. I'm not really well acquainted enough to talk about that, but yeah, the events leading up to World War II and the things that followed the invasion of Poland obviously had a massive effect on his life and his lived experience, and you can for sure see it in this book. As you can see other things like his, like, I don't know, the passing of his father, for example, or yeah, the places he lived growing up in his life. But yeah, you can go on and on, I think, about the imagery in this book, like, I don't know, like the fascist imagery and things like that. And also something I didn't realise until I researched a bit about the book was, like, even the hourglass figure itself, it served as like a symbol for obituaries amongst the Poles. So again, it's like something quite, like, it already has a lot of meaning, the hourglass, but it just adds that other layer of meaning that you wouldn't really interpret unless you're Polish or something. So yeah, it's just got levels upon levels of things you can take from it. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed my review of this book and my thoughts and opinions and everything. Yeah, I really love this book, even though I did kind of struggle with it and had to take a little break halfway through because it was just so, I don't know, intense, I guess. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I thought, as I say, it changed my perspective on things and how I view the world. And I don't know, it kind of takes you back to your inner child, this book. Yeah, and it's super magical, and I hope you enjoyed this book if you've read it. If you didn't enjoy it when you read it, let me know and tell me why you didn't enjoy it. Yeah, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.